Yeah, you don't need me to tell you that the world is in a bit of a mess. Jesus says in Matthew chapter 13, it's a bit like a field of wheat that's also full of weeds. There's good stuff out there, but there are also things that will sap the life out of you, that will choke you, that will make it hard for you to go on. And there are times when all of us will feel like shaking a fist to heaven and saying, why don't you just sort all this out? But Jesus in Matthew 13 does not spend much time speculating on the causes of all that is wrong. In fact, it just says that the enemy put the bad stuff there, that the enemy put the weeds there, that the weeds are part of what it means to live in a fallen, broken, messed up world. And until it is finally sorted at the end of time, then that's how it is. This is a world in which every triumph, every good thing contains a new potential for tragedy. But it's also a world in which each tragedy may be redeemed into a wider triumph. There is evil mixed up with the good. There is good mixed up with the evil. It's like a field of wheat that's also full of weeds. And one thing I want to reassure you of in all this is that God loves you. You see, that is the hard part for armchair philosophers to cope with. If God is all loving and all powerful, they say, then why doesn't he just sort out all the bad stuff? Why doesn't he just get rid of all the weeds? I'm a dad, and I have two girls now grown up. But in my own faltering way, I have learnt a lot about what it means to try to be a loving father. So when they were younger, and one of them asked me, can I ride my bike down the road? I could have said no, because I love them so much I would hate for them to come to any harm. Or I could have said yes, but first let me wrap you in bubble wrap and cotton wool and let me walk always at your side. But they might have accused me of being just a little bit overprotective. No, I knew that the loving thing to do was to give them the space to be themselves and to say yes. But please be careful. Even though saying yes contained within it the potential for tragedy. The amazing writer W.H. Vanston, in his book Love's Endeavour, Love's Expense, says this: the activity of God in creation must be precarious. It must proceed by no assured program. Its progress, like every progress of love, must be an angular progress in which each triumph contains the new potential for tragedy, and each tragedy may be redeemed into a wider triumph, in which, in making of that which is truly an other, control is jeopardized, lost, and through activity yet more intense and vision yet more sublime regained, in which the divine creativity ever extends and enlarges itself, and in which its endeavor is ever poised upon the brink of failure. The creation is safe, he says, not because it moves by program towards a predetermined goal, but because the same loving creativity is ever exercised upon it. God loves you. And in this fallen, broken, messed up world, this world of wheat and weeds, of good and evil, there will always be stuff that happens that breaks our hearts. But God never stops loving you. The farm workers in the story say to the farmer, do you want us to go and gather the weeds? Can we purge this world of evil? And the farmer says no. For in gathering the weeds, you would uproot the wheat along with them. You see, this world is a lot more complicated than it might first appear. There are good people in this world, kind-hearted, loving people. But they're still capable of messing up, of getting it wrong and of hurting others. And there are also messed up people, people who can't help but get it wrong, and yet occasionally even they get it right and do something completely amazing. Can we purge this world of evil? No, because the good and the not so good, our propensity to get it right and our tendency to mess things up are all part of who we are as beautiful, broken human beings. You see, another side of this is that if we cannot purge the world of evil, then the temptation is to take ourselves out of it, to create a ghetto in which we only let the good people in and filter out all that is wrong. Throughout history, that is another way that religious people have tried to cope with the messiness of life. But it doesn't work. We are not called to live in a ghetto. And when a group of Christians seek to exclude others, then I believe that the first person they exclude is Jesus. We are called to live in this fallen, broken, messed up world, this world of wheat and weeds, of good and evil. And in fact, what the farmer says is this: let both of them grow together until the harvest. Allow, permit the good and the evil to coexist. When the Bible was first written, the word used for let or allow or permit is also the word that we sometimes translate as forgive. What is our response as Christians to the evil that is all around us? Well, according to Jesus, the response is to forgive. That does not mean that we do not challenge those responsible for evil. It does not mean that we just ignore those things that are corrupt or corrosive or just plain wrong. But it does mean that we carry within us a capacity to forgive. That is what we have seen in the lives of some of the great Christians of our age. People like Martin Luther King, who had a dream, a vision of a different world, a world in which all people were free. It was this dream, this hope, this faith that helped him to cope with the world as it was. I believe, he said, that unarmed truth and unconditional love will have the final word in reality. That is why he said right temporarily defeated is stronger than evil triumphant. Or Nelson Mandela, whom we remembered yesterday, imprisoned by the apartheid regime for 27 years, who said that this must be a world of democracy and respect for human rights, a world freed from the horrors of poverty, hunger, deprivation and ignorance, relieved of the threat and the scourge of civil wars and external aggression, and unburdened of the great tragedy of millions forced to become refugees. We undertake, he said, that we will do what we can to contribute to the renewal of our world, so that none should in future be described as the wretched of the earth. Well, there was Gordon Wilson, whose daughter was killed by the IRA in Enniskillen, who in an interview with the BBC described those last moments with his daughter and of his feelings towards her killers. She held my hand tightly, he said, and gripped me as hard as she could. She said, "Daddy, I love you very much." Those were her exact words to me, and those were the last words I ever heard her say, he said. And then amazingly he added this: "But I bear no ill will. I bear no grudge. Dirty sort of talk is not going to bring her back to life. She was a great wee lassie. She loved her profession. She was a pet. She's dead. She's in heaven and we shall meet again. I will pray for these men tonight and every night." As historian Jonathan Barden says, no words in more than 25 years of violence in Northern Ireland had such a powerful emotional impact. Gordon Wilson worked for peace in Northern Ireland because he knew that it didn't have to be this way. He knew that living in this fallen, broken, messed up world, this world of wheat and weeds, of good and evil, means that we need to forgive. So it's tough, it's hard, this Christian life, and stuff happens, and while God will one day sort it all out and heal what is broken, until that day we have to live in the midst of the brokenness and the pain, carrying within ourselves the attitude of forgiveness, of love, mercy and grace. I want to close with one final thought. I read somewhere that Jesus was clearly not a gardener. He was a carpenter, and when he talked of building a house on good foundations, then he knew what he was talking about. But here he lost the plot. I mean, What gardener lets the weeds run rampant in their garden? And yet, I have in this garden a large tub, a kind of sink, full of sempervivum. And when I first planted them in, I had taken them from another part of the garden where there were lots of weeds. And sure enough, everything from wild garlic to dandelions grew in their midst. But I did not do any weeding, largely because I didn't have time. But you know what? Soon all the weeds were gone. Because the good sempervivum spread and spread and spread, and there was just no room for the weeds anymore. We have to live in the midst of the brokenness and the pain of this world. And we carry within ourselves that attitude of forgiveness, of love and mercy and grace. But we can also work so that the good in our world flourishes and the evil simply withers in our midst. May God, the author and giver of all good things, nourish you with all goodness and keep you safe in his love. Amen.